The roast chicken was still warm when Dad cleared his throat. I had cooked it myself, the same way I cooked Sunday dinner every week for 3 years. Same kitchen. Same white plates. Same table with the scratched leg nobody ever fixed. My name is Nora Callaway. I am 33 years old. 7 years ago I came back to this house when my family said they needed me, not as a lost child, but as an adult who made a deliberate choice. Dad looked across the table and said it plainly. The house, the mortgage I had been paying for 84 months straight, was being signed over to my brother Brendan. Effective immediately. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Brendan sat across from me with a small, calm smile, nodding slowly like this had been decided long before tonight. My mother Eileen kept her eyes on her plate. Nobody mentioned 7 years. Nobody asked how I felt. It's the practical thing, Nora, Dad said. You understand. I looked around that table. At the house I had paid for. At the mother I had nursed through 2 surgeries. At the brother who had visited exactly 4 times in 7 years. I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I already knew exactly what I needed to do first. 7 years earlier, I was 26 and my career was exactly where I had worked for it to be. I had spent 3 years building my practice as a licensed occupational therapist. I had just received a job offer at a specialist rehabilitation center 3 states away. The salary was nearly double what I earned. It was the kind of offer that comes once. The day before I was meant to sign the contract, Mom called. Dad's small construction firm had collapsed overnight. Unpaid invoices, a legal dispute, a bank loan called in. The family home was 4 months behind on the mortgage. Mom had just been diagnosed with a cardiac condition requiring close, ongoing care. We just need you for a few months, love, she said quietly. Just until we're back on our feet. I turned down the job. I moved home and took a lower-paying local position. I began covering the mortgage, $1,340 every month, from my own salary. I told myself it was temporary. They told me it was temporary. Nobody put anything in writing. Brendan, 2 years older and settled in his city apartment, sent a card. It read, "You're a good daughter." He never offered to pay a single month. I did not leave the table straight after the announcement. I sat long after the plates were cleared and finally did the arithmetic I had never let myself do before. 84 months of mortgage payments, $112,560. The emergency boiler replacement I had covered in year 2, $6,400. Mom's cardiac monitoring equipment and 2 rounds of post-surgical physiotherapy I had partly funded, $19,200. Those were only the numbers I could calculate. There was the career I had turned down at 26, the specialist role I never went back to claim. The professional development I had done on the cheapest plan because money was always tight. My relationship with Joel, which had nearly broken twice because I could never fully commit to a future while my parents still needed me here. I could not put a number on 7 years. I walked to my childhood bedroom and opened my laptop. I started a new document and typed 2 lines at the top. What they promised, what actually happened. I began to write. My hands were very steady. I was not crying. Something harder and quieter than grief had settled inside me, and it felt a great deal like purpose. Brendan was not a villain. That was the first thing I had to accept. He was pleasant at Christmas, generous with compliments, and liked by everyone who had never needed anything from him. He flew home for Mom's first surgery and stayed 4 days. He sent flowers for the second. He had never paid a month of the mortgage, never sat up through a 3 in the morning medication alarm, never left work early for a cardiology appointment. When Dad's business collapsed, Brendan had offered to help however he could. Since nobody said what that meant, it cost him nothing. Now he was receiving the house. That night I sent him a careful message. No accusations, just a question about his understanding of our arrangement. He replied within minutes. Dad said you were always going to move on eventually. This just makes things official. You'll be fine, Nora. You're the capable one. I read it 3 times. You're the capable one. I had heard that my whole life. It was how my family made me feel valued for carrying all the weight. It was how they kept me in place without ever asking directly. I took a screenshot. I added it to the document. The shape of what had been done to me was coming into focus. In my 4th year at home, my closest friend Demi said something I had not asked for. When something feels wrong and you cannot explain it yet, she told me one afternoon at the clinic, write it down. Not for anyone else. Just for yourself. I smiled and half forgot it. But I had listened. In a plain spiral notebook in my bedside drawer, I had been quietly recording things. Dates when I transferred mortgage payments. Notes from conversations about the plan going forward. The evening in year 3 when Dad said the house would of course be divided equally when the time came. I wrote that down with the date beside it. In year 5, after Mum's 2nd surgery, she held my hand and said, "Everything you've given us, we won't forget. This will always be part yours." I wrote that down too. I kept those records not as evidence but because the words felt important and I was afraid of forgetting them. Now, sitting at my desk after the announcement, I pulled the notebook from the drawer and opened it to the first page. What I had built without realizing it was a record. An honest, dated account of 7 full years. Nobody knew it existed. That was about to matter enormously. The morning after the announcement, I met Demi for coffee before work. I had not told Joel yet. I needed to say everything out loud first, to hear how it sounded outside my own head. Demi listened straight through without interrupting, a skill developed working with patients who needed to be heard before they could accept help. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she turned her phone toward me. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post. Brendan and Dad at a city restaurant, arms around each other, taken 14 months ago. The caption read, "Planning the future with this guy." Demi said she had saved it because something had felt off at the time. I stared at the photo. 14 months ago I had been calling the mortgage provider to renegotiate our payment schedule after a difficult month. Dad had told me there was a temporary cash flow issue on his end. While he was saying that, he was sitting in a restaurant with my brother, making different plans. I took the phone and looked at that photo for a long time. 2 people planning a future. Neither of them had included me in it. I added the screenshot to the document. The picture of what had been done, and how long it had been planned, was becoming very clear. That evening I went into Dad's study, not to confront him. He was not home. I went because I needed the property documents, and I knew exactly where they were. I had organized that filing cabinet for 6 years, sorted every folder, labeled every tab. I knew it better than he did. I found the original deed. Both parents' names. Nothing added. Then I searched the county property records online, something I had never had reason to do before. I found what I needed in under 3 minutes. 3 weeks ago, 17 days before Sunday's dinner, a deed transfer had been filed. The property was already being signed over to Nora Callaway. That Tuesday, the day the application was filed, I had driven Mum to her cardiology follow-up. I had waited 2 hours, driven her home, made her lunch, and returned to work for afternoon sessions. While I was doing all of that, my father was at the county office. They had not been planning to tell me. They were going to present it as done when there was nothing I could change. I photographed every document. I emailed everything to myself and saved copies to my personal cloud. I sat still in that study for a long time, 7 years of being dependable, and they had filed the paperwork while I was driving his wife to her appointment. For days after the announcement, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Mum. Sent to me by mistake, meant for Brendan. She hasn't made any trouble yet. I think she'll just accept it. You know how Nora is. I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the table. You know how Nora is. I knew exactly what that meant. Compliant. The one who absorbs things quietly and moves on. The daughter who could always be relied upon to put her own feelings away and carry whatever was placed on her without making anyone uncomfortable. I was 33 years old. I had given 7 years, over $100,000, my career opportunity, and parts of my personal life to this family. And my mother had just described me to my brother with casual, certain confidence as someone who would accept all of it without a sound. She was not wrong about the old Nora. I took a screenshot of the misdirected message and added it to my document, then I typed one new line at the top of the page. They believe I will do nothing. That is the only advantage I have. I closed the laptop, made tea, and went to bed early. Tomorrow I was going to tell Joel everything. Joel was a contracts analyst. He understood how agreements worked, the written ones and the ones that only ever existed as spoken words. I told him everything on a Thursday evening at our kitchen table. The announcement. The deed transfer I had found online. The misdirected message. The notebook. He listened without speaking, without expression, until I had said everything there was to say. Then he asked one question. Do you have bank records going back to the beginning? I did. Every transfer, every month, for 7 years. I kept records carefully, because the past mattered and could not be recovered once it was gone. Joel took the statements and worked through them for nearly 2 hours. When he looked up, his expression was deliberate. There's something called unjust enrichment, he said. You made documented, regular contributions to a property under a clear understanding you would benefit from it. There may also be a proprietary estoppel argument. You changed your life significantly based on their promises. Is that a legal claim? I asked. It's the beginning of one, he said. You need a solicitor. He wrote a name on a torn piece of notepaper and slid it across the table. Amara Osei. Property and Inheritance Law. She is the best I know, he said quietly. 2 days later, Dad called me into the kitchen. He had arranged it like a formal meeting. Mum sat beside him. Brendan joined by video call on a tablet propped against the fruit bowl, his face small and too calm. Dad spoke in the patient tone of someone explaining something simple to someone being needlessly difficult. The decision had been made thoughtfully. I had always been independent and would land on my feet. The arrangement had never been formally agreed. I had come home to help during a difficult period and been compensated through free accommodation and living expenses. Free accommodation. In the house whose mortgage I was paying. I looked at Mum. She was staring at the table. I looked at Brendan on the screen. He was nodding. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not show a single thing that was moving through me at that moment. I understand your position, Dad, I said. I'd like a few weeks to organize my things. Frank's shoulders relaxed. He had braced for a fight and I had given him none. That relieved him. He had no idea that calm, in that moment, was the most dangerous thing in the room. I said goodnight, went upstairs, and called Amara Osei's office from my bedroom asking for the earliest appointment. Amara Osei's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown. She was 51, precise, and wore no expression that gave anything away. She took my folder, read through it in complete silence for 12 minutes, and when she looked up she did not offer sympathy first. She offered assessment. The bank records established substantial, regular, documented financial contribution over 7 years. The dated notebook entries counted as contemporaneous evidence. The misdirected text showed my family was aware of the inequity and had chosen to avoid it. The turned-down job offer, documented in an email still in my archive, demonstrated a measurable life change made in direct reliance on their promises. This is not guaranteed, Amara said. Family financial claims rarely are. She paused. But you have considerably more documentation than most people bring through that door. She set the folder down. Did your parents ever put anything in writing? No, I said. She nodded the way someone does when they are already thinking 3 steps ahead. Then let's talk about what we do next, she said. I had walked into that office feeling like someone trying to fight a river with their bare hands. I walked out feeling like someone who had just been given a very different set of tools to work with. Amara sent a formal letter of claim to Frank and Eileen Callaway. 3 pages, plain and precise. It set out the legal basis, unjust enrichment and proprietary estoppel, and listed every documented contribution. $112,560 in mortgage payments. $6,400 for the boiler. $19,200 in care-related costs. It referenced the career I had declined at 26, with the original email on record. It noted specific dates from my notebook where promises had been made. The letter did not threaten. It requested a meeting. Dad called me 20 minutes after receiving it. His voice was different from the kitchen table tone. Tight. Slightly unsteady. What is this, Nora? It's a letter, Dad. You've gone to a solicitor. Against your own family. I went to a solicitor about my own situation, I said. A long pause. Your mother is very upset. I was very upset too, last Sunday, I said. Nobody called to check on me. I said goodbye and ended the call before he could respond. I sat quietly for a moment. Then I opened my document, wrote the date at the top of a new page, and added one line. They received the letter today. Brendan called on a Saturday morning. The easy pleasantness in his voice was gone. He said I was making things harder than necessary, being dramatic, adding stress to our elderly parents. He had a prepared speech and delivered it with confidence. I let him finish every word. Then I asked him a question. When Mum had her second surgery and needed someone overnight for 3 weeks, where were you? Silence. When the boiler broke in January and Dad couldn't cover it, who did he call? More silence. When the mortgage payments fell behind in year 5, who made up the shortfall? The line went very quiet. I was busy, Nora. I have my own life. So did I said. I had a job offer in another city. A relationship that nearly ended because I could never commit to my future while I was needed here. A life I set down because they asked me to. I paused. I am not making this hard, Brendan. It was already hard. You just did not see it because you were not here. He breathed steadily on the other end. Then he said something I had not expected at all. I did not know about the job, Nora. I said nothing. I had not known whether he had been told. Now I did. On a Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Adeyemi from next door stood on the step with a tin of shortbread. She was 70, recently widowed, and had lived beside our house for 22 years. She was the kind of person who noticed things and remembered them, not from nosiness, but from a lifelong habit of paying attention. I heard things are difficult, she said. I thought you should know something. She opened a small green hardback diary. I keep a daily record. Garden notes, weather, who I see and when. She turned to a page. Your brother's name appears 4 times across 7 years. I have the dates. She paused. Your car was in that driveway before 6 in the morning and back after 9 at night more times than I can easily count. She held the diary out to me. I don't know if this helps. But if it's any use to you, it's yours. I stood in the doorway holding the shortbread tin. I had not felt this particular feeling since the announcement, not the sharp, angry kind, but something quieter and far more solid. The feeling of being seen clearly by someone who had absolutely no reason in the world to lie about what they had observed over 7 years. Amara requested a formal payment history from the mortgage provider. It arrived within a week, printed on official letterhead, every line verified. 84 months. Every payment is listed by date and source. 61 payments had come from my bank account, 23 had come from Dad's, mostly in the early months, tapering steadily as the years passed and the temporary arrangement quietly stopped being temporary and became simply the way things were. I read through that document at Amara's desk. It did not have feelings or opinions or loyalty to either side. It simply showed, in clean official print, who had paid for this house and for how long. Amara attached it to the formal claim as Exhibit C and forwarded everything to the family's appointed solicitor, a man named Warren Slade. "What is he like?" I asked. "Practical," Amara said carefully. "He is known for advising clients to settle quickly when the documentation on the other side is strong." "How strong is ours?" She picked up the mortgage statement. 61 months with a full paper trail, she said. "That is strong." I nodded. For the first time in weeks, the ground beneath me felt solid. But the most powerful piece of evidence had not yet been found. I would find it that same evening, entirely by accident. I was searching my phone archive to gather records for Amara when I found it. A voicemail from Mum, left in year 5, the evening after her second cardiac surgery, on a night I had stayed late at the clinic and missed her call. I had saved it at the time without fully knowing why, the way you keep something that feels important before you understand what it means. I pressed play. Her voice was quieter than usual. Still softened slightly by the day's medication. "Nora, love. I just wanted to say, I know this isn't what you planned. I know how much you've given up. Your father and I have talked about it properly. When the time comes, the house goes to both of you equally. That's a promise, I mean that." 27 seconds. I sat on the edge of my bed and played it again. Then a third time. I had not heard my mother sound like that in years. Unguarded. Genuinely sorry. Genuinely making a promise with her whole voice behind it. My hands were shaking when I forwarded the audio file to Amara. She called back within 20 minutes. "This changes things considerably," she said. "Warren Slade is going to have a very difficult conversation with his clients tomorrow morning." I did not hear from Mum directly for several days after the voicemail was submitted, but Demi heard something through a mutual acquaintance and told me quietly over lunch. Mum had called Rose, a family friend who had known both of us for 15 years, and broken down on the phone. She said she had never wanted things to go this far. That Dad and Brendan had arranged everything between themselves, and she had gone along because she always went along. Because it was easier than standing against something already decided. She said she had not slept properly since Amara's letter arrived. Rose listened without offering comfort. Then she said what needed saying. "Tell Nora, Eileen." "Not me." Mum said she did not know how to start. Rose said, "You call her." Demi watched my face while she told me this, checking carefully whether something had landed too hard. I drove home from work and sat in the car park before going inside. I did not cry until the windows were up and nobody could see. Not from sadness. From the sheer, accumulated weight of spending 7 years loving people who had made it this exhausting to be loved back. I wiped my face, went inside, and made dinner. Some things are processed quietly and then set down. Brendan contacted Amara directly. Not through Warren Slade. Not through our parents. He called her office himself, asked if she would meet with him, and arrived alone on a Wednesday afternoon. No solicitor. Clean jacket. Shoes too polished for someone with nothing to prove. Amara told me about it the following morning. He had asked to understand what I was actually claiming. He was not aggressive. He asked careful questions and listened to the answers, which, she noted, was not something she always saw in these situations. She walked him through the evidence. The mortgage payment history, the dated notebook entries. The voicemail. He did not speak for nearly 2 full minutes when the voicemail transcript was placed in front of him. Then he said, "I did not know this recording existed." Amara said, "I know." He stared at the table. "Dad told me Nora was comfortable with the arrangement. That she preferred things the way they were." Amara looked at him steadily. "The bank statements do not reflect someone comfortable," she said. "They reflect someone who was depended upon." He left with her card and said little else. When Amara described his expression as he walked out, I recognized it immediately. The face of someone who had just learned the story they were given was not the whole story. Warren Slade sent Amara a settlement proposal. It described itself as a goodwill gesture. The amount offered was roughly equivalent to 18 months of mortgage payments, not nothing, but far from the 7 years I had actually contributed. Attached was a document I was expected to sign. It stated that my contributions had been made as familial support without expectation of return. I read it twice at Amara's desk. The money mattered less to me than the language. If I signed, I would be permanently agreeing that my parents' version of events was accurate, that 7 years of my life had been freely given with no promise ever attached. I would be signing away not just my legal claim but the truth of what had happened. I pushed the document back across the desk. "No," I said. Amara nodded once, without surprise. "I was hoping you would say that," she said. She picked up her pen. "Their offer tells us 2 things. They are afraid of the voicemail, and they are more afraid of what comes next if this proceeds." She looked up at me. "We respond firmly, request full mediation, and let the documentation do what documentation does." The offer had told me something else too. They needed my silence far more than I needed their goodwill. Mom appeared at my bedroom door on a Wednesday evening. Not Dad. Not a phone call. Eileen herself, in her dressing gown, looking like someone who had spent a long time preparing to say something and had finally decided to stop preparing and simply say it. She asked if I would sit with her on the back porch. We sat in the dark without speaking for several minutes. The garden was quiet. I could see the rose bushes I had planted in year 3, the vegetable beds I had dug myself the following spring, the edges of everything I had tended while this house became my whole life. Then Mom said, "I meant every word of that voicemail." "I still mean it." I waited. "Your father convinced me a formal arrangement would cause problems. That you would be fine. That Brendan needed the stability more." She paused. "I let him convince me because arguing was harder than agreeing. That is the truth, and I am not proud of it." I looked out at the garden. "You should have said that at the table on Sunday, Mum." "I know," she said. We sat together in the dark for a long time. Nothing was resolved. But it was the first honest conversation we had managed in 7 years, and I held on to every word of it. Amara recommended family mediation before any court proceedings. The session was held in a neutral office on a gray Tuesday morning. Dad came with Warren Slade and sat very straight. Mom came alone and chose a seat slightly apart from Dad's, which the mediator noted quietly. Brendan arrived alone, too. Amara laid out the documentation in chronological order. The career I had turned down. 84 months of mortgage payments. The medical care I had coordinated and partly funded. The dated notebook entries. The voicemail. The mediator asked Dad to confirm or challenge each item one by one. He confirmed the mortgage payments. He confirmed the care provision. He said nothing to challenge the notebook entries. When the mediator read Mom's voicemail transcript aloud in the room, Dad looked at the table and kept his eyes there. Then the mediator turned to Brendan and asked directly whether he had been aware of the full scope of my contributions when he agreed to accept the property transfer. Brendan's answer was quiet and clear. No. I was not aware of the full picture. Dad's jaw tightened. Warren Slade wrote something on his legal pad. The session ended without an agreement. But everything said was now on the record. Witnessed. Dated. Undeniable. The truth had been spoken aloud in a room where it could not be quietly revised. Based on the proprietary estoppel claim formally lodged by Amara, the county property authority placed a legal hold on the deed transfer. The transfer to Brendan could not proceed while the claim was under active review. Amara sent me a short text on a Tuesday afternoon. The hold is confirmed. The house stays in your parents' names until resolution. I was standing in the clinic car park between patient sessions when I read it. I had to sit down in my car for a few minutes, not because it was over, it was far from over. But because the house I had paid for was no longer being quietly transferred away while I stood there holding my notebook and my dignity. The process that had moved without my knowledge had been officially stopped. That evening, Brendan sent me a message. 2 sentences. I told Dad this was wrong. I am sorry I did not say it sooner. I looked at the message for a long time. He had not been given the complete picture. That did not excuse the years of comfortable absence while I carried everything alone, but it was different from deliberate cruelty, and I understood the difference mattered. I did not reply immediately. I did not delete it either. Some things deserve to sit a while before you respond. Dad did not apologize directly. Not in any clean or simple way. What he did was quieter. He stopped going to the Tuesday morning breakfast he had attended every week for 14 years at the local cafe. Mrs. Adeyemi mentioned it without being asked, her voice carrying neither judgment nor satisfaction. He began spending long evenings in his workshop at the back of the garden, the same place where he used to repair things when I was small, when the world still felt reliable and certain. I could see his light on through the kitchen window at 10 at night. I did not know what he was making. I did not ask. What I did instead, one Sunday afternoon while he was in the workshop, was sit at the kitchen table with Mum and talk properly. Not around things. Not with careful, polite edges. About what the last 7 years had actually looked like from the inside. Mum listened. She did not make excuses. She made tea, her default response to things she did not yet have words for, and she listened to everything I said. It was not enough to undo 7 years. But it was more than nothing. And after everything that had happened, more than nothing felt like somewhere real to begin. The formal settlement arrived 6 weeks after mediation. Amara asked me to come to her office rather than discuss it by phone. I sat across her desk and read every clause carefully, the way she had taught me. The terms were clear. I would receive a registered legal interest in the property, a documented share of 38% of the home's current value, calculated to reflect my proportional contribution over 7 years. The remaining interest would stay with my parents during their lifetimes and revert equally to Brendan and me when they passed, exactly as Mum's voicemail had promised. Brendan's original transfer was cancelled entirely. There was no confidentiality clause. No requirement that I describe my contributions as gifts. No agreement that my parents had been right. No silencing language of any kind. This is clean, Amara said. No hidden conditions. No traps. I signed at the end of a Thursday evening. Not at a lawyer's office, at the kitchen table in the house where I had lived for 7 years. Demi was there. Joel was there. The document was properly witnessed. My legal interest in this house was now registered, documented, and permanent. Nobody could revise it. Nobody could quietly transfer it while I was driving someone to a medical appointment. That night I slept better than I had in months. 6 months later, I am still in the house. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Joel and I are looking at a small place of our own, a house with a garden. I have already planned what to fill it with. The search feels completely different from anything I have done in 7 years. Unhurried. Deliberate. Like choosing. Dad appears on Saturday mornings, makes too much toast, and says little. He is present in a way he was not before. Brendan calls once a month. Short calls, still slightly awkward, more honest than anything we managed before. Mrs. Adeyemi's diary was returned with a handwritten note. Demi has been promoted. Joel is measuring the new garden. On the counter beside the kettle, in a small frame, is the settlement document's first line. Nora Callaway, registered legal interest. It does not need to be any more visible. I know what it says. If your family once asked for a little more time, and that time became years, and those years cost you things nobody ever counted, hear this. What you gave was real. What was promised was real. Write it all down. Trust the feeling that tells you something is wrong. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today.